most people are nervous because they expect some of the potential increases that have ranged from 10% on everything coming from China to 25% to, if they annoy us, it's going to be 100%. If you're importing, there will be some changes. There will be rapid changes potentially, and a little bit of pain potentially.
What if I told you everything you built on Amazon could be at risk? With Trump's tariffs looming, the rules of the game are about to change. Higher cost, tighter margins, and a lot of sellers left behind. Now the question is, will you be one of them? Or will you take advantage and prepare for what's about to come? Today we're going to be discussing Trump tariffs and how Amazon sellers can avoid disaster in 2025. Our guest is a lifetime entrepreneur. He has founded, purchased, built, and sold numerous companies over the past 3 decades. Along the way, his companies have been publicly recognized with 3 consecutive years on the Inc. 500 list. He's also been a finalist in the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award. So please welcome Steve Simonson.
Here's Steve. Yeah,
Yeah, there we go.
that's my best intro yet.
There's a lot of talk about these tariffs. A lot of people are spouting off, that's the end of the world, sky's falling. First of all, why don't we just get into what are these tariffs and how are they going to affect Amazon sellers?
Well, the first thing is, so far the tariffs are just a threat. The Trump strategy when it comes to trade and negotiation is to have a giant bit of leverage, right?
Right.
And anybody who understands negotiation should understand leverage. And so when the opposition, and by the way, for anybody who hasn't read The Art of the Deal, you can kind of watch his playbook. This written by Donald Trump, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's hard to remember. And so he's got this big stick that he's going to whack people with until they move his direction. And in this case, it's largely focused on trade, but not entirely focused on trade. Some of it domestically between Mexico and the United States is focused on immigration issues and things of that nature. So I think most people are nervous because they expect some of the potential increases that have ranged from 10% on everything from coming from China to 25% to, if they annoy us, it's going to be 100%. For example, the BRICS nations have been smoldering about setting up a new currency and saying, we're gonna challenge the dollar and a lot of talk. And Trump came out and said, if BRICS tries to mess with the dollar, we're gonna put 100% tariff on all BRICS countries. And if you attack the dollar, you're our enemy. And a lot of India showed up. Oh, whoa, hey, nobody's got a problem with the dollar. Hey, like in whatever impact that these have, we should understand that it's already having behavioral changes.
Right.
You guys sent your little buddy. I think you call him the prime minister, but I call him the Ken doll in charge. Down to Mar-a-Lago, and he's basically trying to negotiate. Right? Isn't that right? The negotiations are ongoing, but it's almost like the Canada's going to be a state, as far as I can tell.
Well, that's the art of the deal, right? He's whacked them with the stick, and now we're going to be the 51st state.
Yeah, exactly. So
you can abide by our terms, or
well, and there's good history for this. Just for those who want to understand these patterns, back in 2016, Trump said we're going to renegotiate the now it's called the USMCA, but back then it was called NAFTA. And this is the North American Free Trade, the original arrangement. And basically Canada under Trudeau was slow playing it. And the Mexican president at the time, who's changed over now, but he came to the table quick. Japan came to the table quick. And so Trump held a news conference basically with the president of Canada, didn't invite the president of or prime minister of, he had Mexico there, not Canada.
Yeah.
I won't get into all these silly titles. And basically said, here's our new USMCA, except it has no C, right? And Canada's like, we weren't even invited. It's like, you didn't agree, so you're out. And so they quickly agreed. So like, I could say this, Trump's negotiation was tough. And in many ways, as an Amazon seller, wasn't great for me, but I understand as a nation, you want to try to balance your trade and level things up. And so he got, a lot of what he wanted. People have their own opinions about whether it worked, but I know it worked from a supply chain basis, because from 2015 forward, every time I went to India, Vietnam, Malaysia, every lounge and every hotel was filled with buyers from all the big companies. Every guy that I would see at the lounge in the evening, you go do factory work all day and you come back, you hang out at the lounge, get some work done, get some food. Virtually every guy in there was a buyer for a big company. And that has continued. So anyway, if we fast forward, there's a little history lesson. We fast forward now, it's like Trump 2 is coming. By the way, Biden kept all of those tariffs in place and put in a very tough lawyer to run that, the trade program. And not only did he put a tough gal in there, she's from Taiwanese descent, which is a real screw you, China, right? There's no diplomacy there. So they talk a lot of politics, but they've maintained similar policies. So Trump's going to ratchet it up. He said, China, you're getting hit, and Canada, you're going to get hit. Mexico, you're going to get hit unless you guys do these things. And so we don't know what's going to actually happen. That's kind of the fundamental long, windy road that I got to, which is we don't yet know, but you should anticipate he will do what he said, because he did it last time. And that means, there's some actions that Amazon sellers need to take.
Loving this episode? Sharing is caring. Don't forget to share this episode and give us a review. Okay, is it just going to be China, or are there other countries involved?
Mexico, Canada, China are the top discussion points right now. But anybody who has a deficit, where the United States is buying more than it's selling, will be negotiated with. I don't think Japan, because they already had their settlement. UK was very close to a settlement. So I think that they're in good position. So that there are some multiple things, including the EU. But like day 2 after Trump was elected, the EU, again, all their titles I don't pay attention to, but basically the leader of the EU, she said, hey, you know what? Maybe we should buy some natural gas from America. I bet you that would be a good thing, right? Which is, trying to get money flowing both directions in a even way is kind of the objective of this. It will never happen, by the way. The U.S. will always buy at a deficit. And there are some strategic reasons why that's important for the U.S., but lots of tariffs. And the only safe thing you can do if you're in America and you're selling in America, the safest thing you can do is to make that a qualified made in the USA product. Outside of that, it might still be using the USMCA, but as we saw, a big car company, BYD, was trying to set up this massive complex in Mexico, and Trump's like, no, you're not playing that. USMCA was not designed to obliterate the car industry. So, we'll change the rule if you weaponize that rule, similar to de minimis shipments. All of that stuff is up for grabs. Like, I would expect if you're importing, there will be some changes. There will be rapid changes potentially, and a little bit of pain potentially.
Yeah, I was talking to Afalabi earlier today, and he was talking to me about, I don't know what the group was called or what the arm of the government is called, but they've been monitoring a ton of companies doing the old hop to hop, like made in China, going to Mexico, going to India to get around these tariffs. And he said, I'm not sure where he got this information from, so this could have been just pulled out of the air, but the government has got 26,000 companies already on this list, and they're going to come down pretty hard on it. So people who think that they could just do that, and I know a few Amazon sellers that are doing that right now. And I don't know if you want to jump in on that and just, people got to be aware that you can't do that.
Well,
for sure.
The first thing I'll say is, so many times I've been at events and been around the world, and, sellers, they'll tell me some story, and it's like, well, for sure, that is not correct. Like, that is for sure not how it's supposed to be. And they're like, well, I've been doing it for 2.5 years. So, and it's like death and taxes, you can't beat either of those. So at some point, somebody could show up and go, you're going to get back charged because you put the wrong HS code on there. Mm-hmm. sometimes referred to as the HTC code. You're going to face the block. Now you can't import because you violated the terms of your bond, if assuming you're a direct importer. Or every shipment is going to go into intensive examination because you are a problem child, and they recognize that. So even if they haven't taken action this moment, doesn't mean they're not going to. And I can say with relative high probability that the de minimis is going to be highly impacted, if not obliterated. So this is where Temu and all these kind of direct from China shippers who are kind of cheating the system, they're going to get obliterated, in my view, sometime next year. I definitely think tariffs will go in. I don't know if they'll go in quick or go in slow, but the entire objective of tariffs is to change the behaviors of the supply chain. People forget that. It's not to put the pain on the importing country, in this case, the United States. It's to get suppliers to go, well, what if you didn't have to pay that, right? This is where the competitive gene in all of us go, well, all right, if I have to pay 25% or 30% or 50% out of China, maybe I'll reroute that somewhere with a lower cost basis. Maybe if you can, you do it to the United States itself. And that is a reasonable strategy. And by the way, it's worked historically. There are some products that we should buy from other countries. There's a principle called local advantage, right? Or comparative advantage is another way to phrase it. So if you are buying, let's just say, New Zealand wool, you're probably going to get that out of New Zealand instead of trying to bring over some New Zealand sheep and make them grow in America and get a big flock. And then now you got kind of New Zealand wool, but it's still American New Zealand wool, right? It's still not the same. So there's comparative advantage, which we should leverage and take advantage of to a reasonable extent. Free trade guys hate tariffs, but I can say that the behaviors that are changing, I can tell you in the last 3 weeks, I got pulled back into a supply chain fix, and we did probably 10 top selling items for a nice company. And all of those we were able to source the United States, by the way. It will be a little bit more costly in the United States, but I think once we get the volume up, we can compete with overseas, like very closely. And the point is, they're going to be able to have a viable U.S. supply chain that will be faster. They'll give them terms, so cash flow is better. Slightly higher cost, but with volume, I think we can overcome that, and no worries about the trade policies anymore. That's kind of the vision of the behavior that's trying to be modified. So I don't know if it'll work, but
Yeah.
So far.
I saw you in action. I don't know where it was, maybe Silicon, maybe one of these events, where you scared the hell out of 95% of the audience because they didn't know if they had the right HS code or the wrong HS code or HTS code. But you mentioned the penalty of trying to get around the system or not knowing the right tariff code.
Yeah.
And you want to explain that? I just saw people's faces drop when you were saying, I'm on the hook for what?
Yeah. Okay, well, this has turned into from lunch with Norm to terror with Steve. Yeah. So here's the way it works in the United States. Whoever is the importer of record has the ultimate liability, and it is an unending liability. The look back period is infinite. So let's just say, for the sake of discussion, I have this discussion all the time, and the Amazon seller says, well, I've been bringing in my pogo sticks for 5 years. I've never had a problem. And I just put it under this code, and my supplier gave it to me, and it's 0%. And if I did it the other way, it'd be 20%. And we've done it 5 years, no problem. Right. So Steve, you're an idiot. That's their takeaway. I go, cool, no problem. I'm just telling you what I know. But I can tell you, a friend of mine had that exact situation where he was importing a product. We told him, here's the code. We pay 8%. He's like, no, I found a better code, 0%. This is not like a bingo card where you just pull a different number. It is what it is. And so for 2 years he went along and it was fine. And he's like, haha, see, you're dumb, Steve. And I'm still paying the 8% like an idiot. And then nearly at the end of that 2 years, he got a shipment seized, or not seized, intensive inspection. And they go, oh, by the way, this shipment is not 0% code, it's 8% code, like Steve said. And by the way, every shipment you've ever done on this product from this supplier is now being back charged. You owe us $180,000, right?
Jeez.
And there are many cases that are worse than that. So I just want to be clear that I like to sleep at night. I just want to do it the right way. And by having, somebody who's very capable, and there are ways to engineer tariffs, right? The way you modify the product in such a way that it qualifies for this slightly different, that one of the old favorites is, if you put felt on the bottom of your shoes, they're now slippers, according to that, right? So according to the tariff definitions. So a shoe or a footwear with felt at the bottom is considered a slipper. And so for a time, shoe companies were putting that felt on the bottom. It would just wear right off, like just a thin layer, but it saved them 40% on tariffs or whatever. And then, the rules got changed or whatever. And so there are ways to modify and engineer these, but I'm always a huge fan. And if you're going to do high volume, I like to just go and get a notice of determination from the customs.
Right.
Costs a few $100. Let them tell you what it is. If you disagree, you fight about it then, not later. And then whatever they say, even if they're wrong, it's binding to them. So it's in my view, a better way to live, because I want to sleep at night. I don't want that liability creeping around. If somebody else is the importer of record, it's their problem, not yours. That's another common Amazon seller strategy, is to get, the factory to be the importer of record and let them play the games. But I'm not a fan, because it's still listing your name somewhere. And I guarantee you customs is keeping track of those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to learn how Steve generated over $1 billion in sales? Check out another episode with Steve Simonson right here. So another question that I've seen in our group is, what is the real threat? How much am I going to have to adjust my price? So let me back that up. People have mentioned that China is going to be subsidized, so there won't be any changes. We don't have to worry about that. Other times, other things I've heard is that, we're going to have to adjust that 10 or 25%. How are we going to survive? Especially if you're on thinner margins.
Yeah. So the first thing is, we've already survived. There's already been a round of tariffs. The world did not end. Everybody adjusted, right? So everybody just has to take a moment and go, it's already happening. There will be, and has been, ongoing subsidization, particularly during this post-COVID era, where China's in a very tenuous position. And we can come back to that later, but let's just say that things aren't going great over in China, financially, economically, spiritually, perhaps, I don't know. But they've got some issues there economically. So that incentivizes their government to rely on exports. The problem is, tariffs are one thing, duties are another thing, but there's also, countervailing duties another thing, but there's also anti-dumping that can come up. And just as an example, in the old days, China was making bedroom sets, and they were making them super cheap, and they were subsidizing them very heavily to keep their industries going. And at some point, the trade office of the United States says, nope, they're dumping. And now all bedroom sets from China have a 400% anti-dumping duty. By the way, they have this on paper. There's a ton of anti-dumping duties. So the point is, even if there's some subsidization from the suppliers, that may or may not last long. And the biggest challenge with that, and again, I don't say any of this is free. I'm just reporting the news, everybody. It's not me making the rules. But there can be, tomorrow, let's just say you sell sofas. There could be a notice of, I don't remember the precise term, but basically an anti-dumping investigation. And the day they notify you of that investigation may take 2 or 3 years. And whatever the determination is, it will be retroactive to those 3 years. So this is a big problem, right? Because all sellers want, any entrepreneur or business wants, is consistency and clear, laws, regulations, and so forth, to just make it easy for us to comply. So whatever the number is, that's not the issue. It's just if it goes up and down too fast, or if there's, these types of investigations. So my advice is, first, look for alternatives. I've said this now for the better part of 3 or 4 years, probably longer than that, because we started doing this in 2016 in earnest, trying to move supply chain, and we were pretty successful in that, with Vietnam being the biggest beneficiary. In around 2016, 2017, we moved 20 containers a month from China to Germany, right? We thought, hey, and it was a win economically, time-wise, like terms, everything was a win. But then Ukraine happened, and now Germany's out because the cost of power's too high, right? So geopolitics is not a static situation. And so, as much as we try to make a move, that move could be counteracted by something else geopolitically. So if your volume is not that small, then believe me, you're going to be able to negotiate it, deal with your supplier. There is a deflation, a natural deflation happening right now in China. Like, that's happening. If your price hasn't gone down on your product due to the cost of the raw materials themselves, due to currency, like, you are not paying attention. Get in the game. All costs have gone down in China. We pay less now on certain, more than average, on the vast majority. I'm going to say 85% of products that I still have my touch points on, we pay less now than we did in 2019. If you're not paying less now and having better terms and all the little bells and whistles, you're not doing it right.
Especially if you've had a few orders with your supplier, to get in there, renegotiate. I mean, we have one company that we negotiated with, and we went from 30% upfront. Then when it got shipped, we had to pay the full balance. Now we have 90-day terms. That's the first time I've ever had 90-day terms with a Chinese supplier. We even got them to put a portion of our stock. This is for the brand that we're working with, but they put a full order. We pay 20%, so that when the trigger gets sent that we need to take from our 3PL over to Amazon, it goes over to the supplier. They put it on the water, and then they put in another order. And so we're paying very little for that, and we get 90-day terms after the 20%. And that's the only one I've got. That usually I can get 30, maybe 60, but 90 days was a one-time off. How about you? Have you seen where you've been able to get terms like that, or what's the norm?
There are some criteria to be discussed here. So my norm for terms with Norm here on Lunch with Norm. I think it's very easy to get 0% net 60. Super easy to get that if you have adequate volume, especially if you've done business with a supplier over time, and especially if your volume, is collectively in China more than, let's say, $1 million a year. Relatively easy. And by the way, it might cost you an extra 1% added to your cost to kick it to 90 days. If you go, instead of $1, I'll pay $1.01, I want an extra 30-day terms, they'll go, okay, right? So it's 0.5% per 15 days to get those. And as long as they have the wherewithal to, they get a what's called credit insurance from Sinosure. And by the way, I did a video on this on YouTube, how to use Sinosure. And because I got this question an awful lot, if you're only buying, $2,000 worth of ping pong paddles, once every 6 years, you're not getting terms. Okay. That's not how this works. But if you're doing consistent business, particularly if it's with the same supplier, and any supplier goes, we've never given terms to anybody, liar or stupid, right? That's the choice. They're either stupid because it's possible they can't afford to do it, which is terrible news for you. That means that they're on the precipice of dying. And just so you know, like in the last 5 years, the numbers of new businesses in China for the first time has gone below significantly the numbers of businesses that have failed or closed. So like, it's upside down in China in a very significant way. There's a ton of pressure economically in China, socially, and in many regards. And all of that chaos is bad for us, right? And another good reason to go, well, what if there's an option? And there is no perfect solution. Right? I don't remember who said it first, but I remember Thomas Sowell saying this. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. No solutions, just trade-offs. So you go, okay, well, I'm going to Vietnam. And they go, okay, cool. And they go, oh, it's going to take us 3 weeks longer because they're slower. Or, I'm going to India. And it's like, all right, well, it's going to take me 6 months to source that correctly because, there's a different culture, about how responsive people are. We're doing I've got a team in India. They're doing a $10 million line in India right now. And it's like pulling teeth. It's like, we have $10 million to give the winner. And they're like, it's wedding season. Like nobody's running, chasing this 10 million. In China, they'd be chasing it and, nearly throttling us to death until we reward them with that business. So these cultural trade-offs and differences have to be factored in. But the mention I just made of the items that we're able to source in the United States, that will end up being tens of millions of dollars worth of purchasing over the next couple of years, and has the potential to be 50 or 60 million dollars of retail business for that company, all made in the USA.
Jeez.
Not that hard.
Yeah, not that hard. Want to enter our live giveaways? Make sure you subscribe to tune in to our live Wednesday episodes at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're at the bottom of the hour. We got lots of people listening today. If this is the first time you're listening to the podcast, we have something unique at the top of the hour. It's called Wheel of Kelsey. Today, we have a prize. This is from Honu Worldwide, from Afalabi. He is doing a workshop. I just heard about it today. It's a 3-day workshop, which is an hour a day. It's not like you got to dedicate 3 days, but it's an hour a day on tariffs. I thought it was timely for this podcast. So if you're interested in this course that's coming out, we will be putting a comment into our WhatsApp group. We'll put the link in the WhatsApp group. But for today, if you're interested in learning more about tariffs and how to kind of understand the ins and outs, it's hashtag Wheel of Kelsey, tag 2 people, and you'll get a free link to the course. Okay, now I guess we go to a sponsor and we'll be right back with Steve. Hey, Amazon sellers, are you leaving money on the table with Amazon? Well, TrueOps is here to help you reclaim every last cent you're owed. Over 1,400 brands have already recouped millions with TrueOps cutting-edge technology, finding reimbursements others may have missed. And guess what? You only pay 10% commission, no more overpaying the industry standard of 25%. Plus, the first $1,000 in reimbursements is free to you. Here's the best part. TrueOps doesn't get paid unless you do. If Amazon ever reverses a claim, TrueOps automatically credits your fees back to you. Now that's peace of mind. Remember, $1,000 free reimbursements to start, then just 10% of successfully recovered funds. You have nothing to lose but the 3 minutes it takes to sign up for a free audit and so much more to gain. Sign up with the link in the description and start reclaiming what's rightfully yours. Questions that come up in the group, and this is probably the biggest question that comes up in the group is, what if? So the tariffs might happen. We don't know if they are or not, or how much, but this is the question that I usually get. I only have thin margins. I know what my answer would be. I'm working on thin margins. This might break me. How can I prepare? How can I even deal with this? For me, I know that, well, why are you dealing on thin margins and going on to Amazon? But how can we prepare, Steve? How can we make sure that if this comes down, that we can make sure that we still have some profit?
Well, really, the first question should be, why are the margins so thin? Like that,
Yeah,
maybe that
yes.
product is not viable. I could say that I haven't really done, I've turned down most of the opportunities I have had to speak and travel around the world this year because I'm working on a bunch of tech stuff, a lot of AI. It's pretty fun. So far, the bots are not
Pretty
rising
cool.
up, so everyone can relax. But so I've just kind of been tending to my own knitting, as they say. But when I have had the chance to rub elbows with some, great people, great sellers, I've found too often that their basic business model is not viable. The basic economic model of their product, for example. So we call this basic unit economics. If your basic product is not really going to be profitable, don't sell more of it, kill it, right? Get rid of it. And people get, I think, a little bit too emotional about these types of things, or they're like, well, I already have a product, even if it's not a lot of margin, it's something. Fair enough, fine. But you should be motivated to find something where the basic unit economics can sustain a real business. The other thing I will tell you is that there is a market price for products you buy, right? So too often I hear, oh, I met this supplier, 10 years ago, and I know them so well, and they're my dear friends, and their kids have come over and stayed with me, and like all of these things. And for the millionth time, I'll say, go read Poorly Made in China to learn how you're being manipulated. If you don't know the market price of the item you're looking for, then you are making a mistake, right? Do you think that General Motors is going to go to some part supplier and go, just give me your best price, Frank? We've been doing business 50 years. They might say that, but they'll go, by the way, we're going to go Frank, Tony, Bob, and Pete, and we're going to get prices from everybody and keep it competitive. We'll make sure that we're comparing apples to apples, and specifications have to be identical, and capabilities have to be there, and scale, and right. There's qualifications that have to be done with this process, but too few times, I should say, Amazon sellers are focusing on this basic unit economic and then the market pricing of their product. By the way, at a certain point, the market price is the market price. You're not going to be able to do any better than I can do or Walmart can do or anybody else. That's the price. So now if you have a common market price to buy at and the market is selling at a certain price, there's only one thing left for you to do, and that's to control the cost of your overhead and operations. And I would just say this, it's maybe an unpopular opinion, and it certainly is not talked about that much, but Rockefeller had some saying, something like the tyranny of compounding costs will devastate compounding, profits. And the whole idea is if your costs of operation are increasing faster than your profits, you have a big problem on your hands. And so please understand there's a market rate for that product in each country. Sometimes there may be trade-offs with each country buying, terms or timing or, what have you. Sometimes it's just the raw materials themselves. Mm-hmm. We've been able to sell items at a premium price that had superior raw materials because we can build value into those benefits, right? Sellers often talk about features, consumers buy benefits. So if instead of making this item out of whatever polyethylene canvas, I make it out of some new hemp, all natural, blah, blah. The customer, you could sell to a certain segment of the customer that premium benefit instead of, just the feature. So the whole point is, differentiation, as it's always been, is still important. Market price is important. Keeping your overhead tight. I've been saying for 3 years, get tight. I say it even louder right now. Although I think there's a great resurgence potential here certainly in the North American market, especially the United States, I would not take it for granted. It will be the survival of the fittest, as it always has been.
Yeah. Right now, taking a look, just even coming back to the U.S., we had this item that we were sourcing, and it was handmade, hand cut, and it was all assembled in China, came over. So there was a cost and a time issue also with doing it all handmade. We took it, or I should say Afalabi took it, and he started doing some research, and he found just an automated way of cutting the wood here in North America. Then he said, well, maybe it'll be cheaper if we looked into resin. It was stronger. It was one mold, and it became, I think the wood version we saw in Canada was 30% cheaper, and I believe it was 60% cheaper going to resin. Better product, material, made in U.S. So you can do the sourcing. One of the things I was going to ask you about when you went to Vietnam, I do know that there's a lot of manufacturers from China that went to Vietnam and were opening up factories over there and different places all over the world. So you had that Chinese culture there. But if you went over to Vietnam and the average, like I hear a lot of people talking about Vietnam, India, Korea for cosmetics, like just a wide variety of other countries. You said it earlier, they might not have the culture. So how do you know you have the culture when you're starting to try to get that second or third supplier in your back pocket?
Well, I mean, it's pretty easy. If you send them an email, they don't respond. Cultural miss, right? But sometimes, particularly at this time right now, like
Mhm.
believe me, the tariff kicks up a lot of dust, right? Tariff talk kicks up dust, and so there's people panicking across the globe trying to get American made or Vietnamese made, and whatever it is to get out of the line of fire. And so
Mhm.
you have to show that you're worth a dang, right? So maybe you send an email, they didn't respond. Maybe it's cultural, maybe they're busy. Hit them a couple times, try and figure out their WhatsApp, try to ring them on WhatsApp, or better yet, maybe get somebody on the ground in Vietnam who can run around and do some of this for you, whether it's a sourcing agent or a trading company or your own person. I'm relatively agnostic on that front. When you're starting out, especially, those all can add value. By George, if I've had many times where trading companies can save us money, and so this idea that if you're not buying directly from the factory, you're not getting the best price, as a pure statement, is a fallacy. That is not correct. Over time, it's true. If you're buying 20 containers a month from somebody, you're going to be able to get a better price directly from the factory. But if you're just buying a few thousand units every now and then, more often than not, a trading company can do better for you. So, my general advice is you'll determine the cultural values and the acceptance that you can have to it, or the workarounds for it. Right now, I've got somebody stationed in Uttar Pradesh or Uttar Pradesh in India. They ain't leaving until they get that thing sourced. So they will meet with, you know, 20, 30, 50 different suppliers and many different parts of the supply chain until they nail it. And that's just it's a cost of doing business. It's an investment in the item. But if you're about to spend $10 million, you will spend thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands, to get the sourcing right. And that has long-term benefits. So my point is not that you should go spend $10,000 to source the item, but to just figure out what's your route into the market based on your own size, your own scale, capabilities. And then, all of us brand owners say, oh, I own the brand, but very few of us know any of the specifications. So to your point
Mm.
just moments ago, if you knew it was made of this kind of metal or this kind of plastic or resin or whatever, and sometimes you just have to ask the factory, go, how can we make this stronger, cheaper, faster, lighter, tougher, whatever it is? They'll go, well, I could, replace it with this stuff, which would be, twice as strong, but, it's going to cost you an extra 12 cents. And you said you wanted the cheapest price, so I didn't even bring it up. Like, this is a story that's happened to me many times. I said I want the best price. And so they put in the worst, connector spring, whatever it was. And if I paid literally a dime more, everything went perfect, right? On $100 item, by the way. So understanding the specifications, understanding every piece of it, and then asking questions. That is really the way to decode culture.
Okay, I've got one last question before we go over to the questions. But how can we flip this? Like, could Trump tariffs actually be an opportunity disguised as a challenge for Amazon sellers?
Well, I certainly think so. Like everything that we do is a competitive. You're selling against competition. I don't know anybody who has no competition, right? And so that means that competitor is going to try to do whatever they think they can do to win. Lower the price, right? If you have a lower cost basis, that's a pretty good edge. And so this is how the global supply chain kind of got dispersed anyway. Comparative advantage of labor in China 20, 30 years ago was amazing, right? When I started 25 years ago in China, the cost of labor was 15 times lower than now.
Hmm.
China's labor is not cheap. India's way cheaper. Mexico's cheaper. But China's advantage is the sunk cost in factories. So I would just take this as, I don't know. I always think of business as like a video game, right? It's like I'm getting points over here on the buy side, or I'm losing points over here on the freight side, and you just try to keep optimizing all the quadrants until you're winning in every quadrant. It's not easy, but if it was easy, anybody could do it, and you have no value in the system, right? And so whatever you choose to do, whether it's double down on China and figure out a way to deal with the cost increases, that doesn't mean I would not take it out of your margin. If you don't understand the margin is the only spendable amount of money that you have, you're not ready for business. Like, you can sell $100 million worth of turnover. In fact, I can tell you a Amazon company, I forget their name, they were doing $500 million a year and they were losing money on every transaction and shut down. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You have to have margin. Margin is the only thing that you can spend on overhead, personnel, your own ability to repurchase new inventory, and maybe even throw yourself a Scooby snack. So, I'm very, very committed and passionate about the idea of entrepreneurs understanding that basic unit economic and then expanding it by product and turning it into, geez, well, dare I say, a real business.
Very good. Hey, Kels, let's go to some questions.
All right. First question from Tony. As a Canadian, should I try opening a US-based LLC?
Well, Tony, nice to see you. As you're not lawyer or accountant, I don't know. Good luck to you.
There you go.
Yeah.
Next question.
All right. This one's from Brian. One major compromise will be inflation. No, every country will know why we are coming for the price. They aren't going to undercut China cost by much and give away margin.
Logical. That's a logical assertion, but no, I don't think that's going to happen. So, number one, you're right. If you go to Vietnam, if the cost basis of Vietnam is $10 and the cost basis of China is $12, let's just call it the root cost basis. Vietnam knows that. They go, well, we'll sell it to you for $11.50, right? And so that might be their effort. But the truth is, their cost base in Vietnam is not as low as China. So often it's, just getting parity with China is difficult, again, because of sunk costs. I know I skipped over that, but if you built all your factories over the last 20 years, all of that capital investment has been done. Yeah, they might put a machine here or there, but they've spent all of that money. The United States has not spent that money yet. That's ongoing to build up the infrastructure. And other countries, Vietnam and likewise, are doing that. By the way, in Vietnam, there are, I would say, a third Vietnamese-based, owned companies, a third Korean-owned companies, and maybe a third, or 20% China, and the rest miscellaneous. But there's a lot of different components depending on where you are in Vietnam and the types of things you're buying. But no, this is not automatic inflation. 10% of cost basis on an item is not the end of the world, right? Even if you're buying an item for $50 and your cost went up by $5, you do your markup, it's not the end of the world. It's just, it's just part of the world, part of the reality we live in. And we've already absorbed, in many cases, 10, 20%, 25% increases. And that's just going to happen to more places, which will give more incentive for people to go look for alternatives. And we have found in India, Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, Korea, all the Southeast ASEAN region, ASEAN region, can replace China, but one country cannot, right? We've talked about this before, population and, capabilities and infrastructure. So, India can do really great at some stuff. I have a really great injected molding guy and metals guy in India and plastics guy in India, some wood guys in it, but it takes time to develop that. And it takes some energy. And they're run a little slower. So, if China was 6 weeks, you should assume it's 9 weeks out of India, and you better be on them, right? And so in terms of price, it's not about giving away margin. Factories need to move volume. That's one thing to understand. Factories, if they don't do volume, they're out of business. So their margins they'll ebb and flow based on their throughput. And the more stuff they make, the better their margins get. That's how production works, right? You just get more efficient. It's not that much more of a cost to process 2,000 units than 1,000 units, or 10,000 instead of 20,000, throw the extra 10,000 on. The incremental cost of that factory is tiny. Their margin is much higher on those higher produced units. Mm-hmm. So I expect this to not be inflationary. It hasn't been in the past, by the way, just flat out, pure and simple. Tariff did not drive inflation. In my opinion, not being a economist per se, but energy is what drove most of inflation, in my opinion.
My old business partner, many years ago, we were talking last week, and he might be listening right now. Hey, Dave. But he said that he's big into distiller merch, alcohol merch like Coors and Budweiser. So you see all his signages in all these bars, neon signs, tin signs. And he was getting almost everything out of China. He went to a sourcing agent, and I couldn't believe this. He turned most of his production to the Philippines. He found the quality was better. And again, dealing with a lot of countries, the culture is different than China, but he found that the Philippines was fantastic. And most of his manufacturing now is done out of the Philippines.
The nice thing about China is it's always been the easy button.
Yeah.
Right. It's just easy. But there are lots of countries, many of which are very hungry for business. Argentina really wants a lot of business right now. They would love to be an exporter. The United States wants to, try to condense the nonsense here. So, and by the way, the United States can make many things, textiles and woods and oils, cheaper than a lot of countries. It's just the labor that the United States doesn't have. So if you have machines or automation, the United States can be quite competitive. In fact, I think we're going to end up having a net lower cost on some of these items, the 10 items I mentioned earlier, in the United States than some of the others. Once we get the scale of manufacturing past, say 500,000 units a year.
All right. Last question.
All right. From Tony again. How can we find US-based manufacturers? Many depend on components from outside. Is that right?
There can be some component requirements from outside the United States, but in some of the items we've looked at, so first of all, there's a made in the USA quotient of around 75% has to be US based, right? So the assignment of value and all of that stuff, I won't get into attribution of how all that works, but just, that gives you 25% or 24% you can source from outside the US and then assemble or add those components. But, stamped metal, we can do that cheaper in Michigan than probably even China. The only thing that we're going to have to pay more for, so there are various pieces in this particular product, and there's some metal pieces and there's some plastic pieces and some but we can mold all the stuff and stamp all the stuff in the United States. The fabric stuff initially might be cheaper to get from overseas, but it's a smaller value. And the only reason why it's cheaper is because we can't do the massive truckload volume we have to do out of the United States to get the good textile price here. So yes, you can do that. How do you find U.S. manufacturers? It's hard. You start with web searches. You start with going to trade shows. These guys that I'm sourcing these products with, I've known these guys and kind of their manufacturing groups in different places around the world, and they have some facilities. But it's not easy. But like you have to just start somewhere. So if you are selling a certain product, find the trade show where all those manufacturers go to it. Usually it's regional. In the furniture business, North Carolina, in the old days, if you just went to the High Point, North Carolina, you got to meet lots of manufacturers in furniture. And, rugs, it was North Georgia. And, you just keep moving down the line, find your specialty. There's cosmetic shows, there's natural shows, there's dog shows, there's every kind of show. And that's a good way to get educated on the industry.
All right. So I think that wraps it up. Steve, people wanting to, new products, projects. You talked about AI. How do people check that out?
Yeah. First thing is, if you have questions for me, go to mymentorsteve.com. I've set up an AI chatbot for you. I've loaded a bunch of stuff like Sinosure and a bunch of my podcasts and some of the blogs and other things that I've written or thought about over time. And I think it's done a reasonably nice job. So if you could just go to My Mentor Steve, it goes to a free thing. I'm not paid. Nobody's paid. And that's one way to get advice about sourcing and setting up e-com companies and so forth. If you want to check out some of the AI stuff, just go to parsimony.com and click around there. We're doing, I think, really fun, interesting things that every company will utilize some of these types of functions, AI voice bots, message bots, there will be bots that are managing other little bots doing jobs like the SEO or whatever. So it's going to be a very fun, 12 months.
Yeah, we had a chance to take a look at it the other day, and it's phenomenal. So check it out. And Kelsey, if you could put up that link, that would be fantastic. All right, let's have one more sponsor and then go to the wheel. If you new to the podcast, hashtag Wheel of Kelsey or tag 2 people, and you'll get an entry into today's giveaway, which is the 3-day tariff workshop from Honu Worldwide and Afalabi Orocon. Okay, let's go to the commercial.
Start, scale, exit, repeat. I'm Colin C. Campbell, and I've started over a dozen multi-million-dollar companies in the last 30 years. I spent the last 10 years writing the book, Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat, to figure out what it is that these serial entrepreneurs do over and over again. We interviewed over 200 people. We created 58 chapters, over 30 illustrations, 180 callouts, and we quite frankly made this book for the ADHD entrepreneur. It's been #1 on Amazon in 15 categories and has won 12 awards globally. Get your book today, either on ebook, paperback, hardcover, or Audible on Amazon or your favorite bookstore.
That's 25 awards now. And geez, did he interview you? You're a big shot.
Well, I certainly was lucky enough to meet and know Colin. He's been great. He's tried to have me come on the startup thing that he does. So we'll get there eventually. But I love the guy. He's great, and it's a great book. I've read the book. Yeah. I like how you can just jump around in it. I highly recommend for any entrepreneur. Love it.
All right, fantastic. Okay, let's go to the wheel.
It's time for the Wheel of Kelsey.
Thank you everyone for entering. Let me shuffle these up quickly. If you are the winner, please email me k@lunchwithnorm.com. And it looks like Jessica is the winner.
The last person to enter, and she wins a prize. Congratulations, Jessica. You're going to love this workshop. All right, Mr. Simonson, we got through the tech glitches.
Yeah.
We're at the end of the podcast, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always great to see you guys. And, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever. Pick your holiday for everybody out there. I hope you have just an absolutely smashing Q4 and prepare for next year. It's going to be, I think, the best, next 3 years will be absolutely smashing business opportunities.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll see you later. Yep. Okay. So that's it. Kels, you want to pop back on?
All right. Welcome. Thank you everyone for watching. Jessica says, awesome. Thanks so much. Great podcast. Thank you everyone for checking us out. And I hope you guys like the new thumbnail. Also, we're editing the videos in a new style. So you'll be seeing that in the coming days. If you want to check out the newsletter, it is lwn.news. And make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And I think that's it.
All right. Very good. Like Kelsey mentioned, you can check out that newsletter. It's always a personal story, then summed up into a business lesson. We've got a couple of ways that you can follow us in a community. We've got the podcast. We have the newsletter. We have a WhatsApp group and the Facebook group. So if you're interested, just check out Lunch with Norm. You'll find out, just type in Lunch with Norm and you'll be able to log into any of those. Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks so much for being part of the community. We couldn't do this podcast without you, and we will see you next Wednesday. All right, guys, see you later.